Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Samach Dalid in Masechet Avodah Zarah, 64. We are, let me share my screen and we'll really get started. Yesterday we're continuing in the final chapter of Masechet Avodah Zarah, which opened with a Mishnah that noted that one may not benefit from wages paid to work directly with Yayin Nesech. So if you're asked to fill bottles of yayin nesech, and even though you might get paid for it, you have to say no, I don't want to do it. And if you do get paid for it, the wages that you get are themselves prohibited to benefit from. So yesterday, the Gemara concluded with the following question: what if the work that one is hired to perform directly with yayin nesech is to break the barrels and spill out the wine? Do we say that that the wages the remain prohibited because the worker wants the wine to continue to exist until he breaks the barrels and spills out the wine, and so as a result, he's not going to get paid if the barrels all disappear. So as a result, he naturally wants the barrels to stay in existence until he breaks them. So is that as if he wants the yain nesek to exist, and therefore the wages should be prohibited, because otherwise he won't get paid? Or do we say, no, the job is all about reducing the amount of idolatrous product in the world, and so it should be permitted? And yesterday we answered that Rav Nachman said he should break the barrels and blessing should come to him. And we then cited a brisa that we suggested showed that Rav Nachman was correct. So what did the brisa say? It said, we may not hoe around the kalayim for an idolater, meaning that if an idolater has two products grown together, that they're not allowed to be grown together. So you're not allowed to, facilitate that growth, even though it's owned by an idolater. An idolater doesn't have the prohibition of kalayim, right, presumably, but but you can't facilitate it because that would be too much work with the kalayim. But if the same idolater hires you to uproot the produce, well, then you can do so in order to reduce the futility in the world, in order to reduce the amount of bad stuff in the world, and specifically the kalayim in the world. So we noted that this brisa seems to reflect the views of both the rabbis and Rabbi Akiva. The rabbis say one may not help kalayim grow, but one may preserve kalayim. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that we say at the beginning of this brisa that you're not allowed to hoe, and rather than say that you're not allowed to maintain, that shows that it's consistent with the rabbis, because the rabbis limit the prohibition to hoeing, to producing, to not just maintaining. And Rabbi Akiva says that one may not even preserve kalayim, and that's consistent with the latter line of the brisa, because the latter line of the brisa allows us to uproot. And if it were according to the rabbis, right, well, then the rabbis would allow even preservation. So why does it need to tell us that of course you can uproot according to the rabbis? So therefore, it must be according to both of them. And the key is that if it's also according to Rabbi Akiva, then what does Rabbi Akiva say? It says you're not allowed to maintain something, but even though you want it to stick around, if you're hired to destroy it, it's okay to be hired to destroy it. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the brisa says that one may be paid to uproot kalayim, even though one wants the kalayim to stick around so that he can uproot them. That's just like Rav Nachman's statement. Rav Nachman said that one can be hired to break barrels of yayin nesech, even though one wants the yayin nesech to stick around so that he can break the barrels. So as we pick up in the middle of the seventh line of Samach Daled Amud Aleph, the Gemara suggests that the brisa may not in fact support Rav Nachman. So, no, you don't have to say that this brisa supports Rav Nachman, because Hamani, who is the brisa only according to, It's only according to Rabbanan. It's only according to the rabbis. Now remember, we said, how come we thought that this brisa was also according to Rabbi Akiva? Because if it was according to the rabbis, well, then why bother telling us that they can that the person can be hired to uproot the Kalayim? He could even be hired to maintain the Kalayim. So that's the Gemara's next question. Irabanan, my irya okrin. Why are you telling me about uprooting? It should be afilu kayume nami shaper dami. According to the rabbis, you can even maintain the Kalayim. So why are you telling me about uprooting? You should be telling me about maintaining. So Hakabamayas, we change the case completely. Rather than tell us that something about being hired and whether or not destruction, wanting something to stick around when you need to destroy it is a violation. It's kagon de ka'avid b'chinam. The point is that we didn't say that the person is being hired to work. It's just the work is being done for the non-Jew. Rabbi Yehuda he Amar, and it's Rabbi Yehuda who says Litein lahem matanas chinam asur, that you're not allowed to give a present to an idolater. And so the question is, if an idolater wants you to destroy their Kalayim, is destroying their Kalayim considered a present? Because it's something that they want, so you're doing something for them for free, but is the fact that you're destroying the Kalayim sufficiently a good thing in the global perspective that will say that even though generally you can't do something for an idolater, will allow you to do this work? As Rashi says, Rabbanan who, that this is really, I'm sorry, La'olam Rabbanan he, V'hai de'itzrich lemishrei okrin, and that which the Brisa talks specifically about uprooting, la mishum isur rotza b'kiyumo. It's not because we're concerned about the prohibition of and telling us something about the prohibition of the person who wants to keep around the Kalayim until he's able to uproot it. Ela mishum isur matnas chinam. It's rather about the prohibition of giving something to an idolater. Rabbi Yehuda, and it's according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar b'Perakama, who, as we saw earlier, apparently on Dav Kof, Asur litain lahem matanas chinam, that you're not allowed to give a gift for free to an idolater. Va'ashme'inan, and so as a result, we are learning from here, Dilamu'ute Tifla Shapir Dami, that when it comes to a gift that thereby reduces the amount of silliness of folly in the world, so then we're going to say that that's the kind of gift that's permitted. Okay, and so there we have it, and so now we've got the and so that is so now we've said basically that it does not have to in fact be this does not necessarily have to be a proof to Rav Nachman, that when Rav Nachman said that one is allowed to be hired to spill out Yayin Nesech, it's not necessary that you don't have to say that this brisa supports him. But we're not done. And now, in fact, the Gemara comes back and says, you know what? Yeah, we can say that this brisa supports. Mid Rebbe Yehuda, Nishmala Rebbe Akiva. Well, 1 second. You want to tell me that this brisa is only according to the rabbis, but and it's following the principles of Rebbe Yehuda. But if you use those principles, we can derive something about Rebbe Akiva's opinion. Because Lav Amar Rebbe Yehuda Asur Litain Lahem Matnas Chinam, the Rebbe Yehuda says you can't give a gift. But what does he allow you to do? Even though there's a prohibition of giving a gift, we're allowed to reduce the amount of folly in the world. And so as a result, we're allowing him to do this work of uprooting the Kalayim. So Rabbi Akiva Nami. So Rabbi Akiva, we could say the same basic principles. Even though if you were to ordinarily maintain climb, you would get lashes. You would, the Rebbe Akiva would clearly say that if you are reducing the amount of futility of ridiculousness in the world by eliminating the kolayim, that you're allowed to do that. And you know what? If we allow that, if we say that, we've gotten to the exact same point, Visulomidi, and there's nothing more to say. Meaning that if you say the Brisa is Rebbe Akiva, well, then the Brisa supports Rav Nachman. And if you say the Brisa is only the rabbis, the implications of that Brisa still support when it comes to Rebbe Akiva, using Rebbe Akiva's thought process, still support Rav Nachman. So as a result, Rav Nachman is supported no matter what you say. Okay, so all of this was based on Rav Nachman, Ula, and Avimi Bar Papa sitting together and asking questions. And so now the Gemara picks up with another question that they were sitting and discussing. Hadar Yasve, the Kamibailahu. They sat and a little bit more, and they asked additionally, Demei Avodas Kochavim Biad Ovid Kochavim Mahu. If an idolater sells an idol and now is holding on to the money, what's the status of that money? Now, if I, God forbid, were to sell an idol and hold money, the money that I get from selling that idol is 100% prohibited, because just as the idol was prohibited, now the money is prohibited. But do we say the same thing for an idolater? So let's take a look. So Amar Lohu Rav Nachman again comes to the rescue and tries to answer, although this time we will not be as successful. So Amar Lohu Rav Nachman, Mistabra Demei Avodas Kochavim, Biyad Avodas Kochavim, Mutarin. I think it makes sense to say that it's permitted, that you do not apply the prohibition of an idol to the money that's exchanged for it. And how do I think that? Midahanu de asu lekame de Rabba Barabua. Because there were these people who came in front of Rabba Barabua. Now we're going to see that these people were in the process of conversion. Because listen to what he said. Amar lahu, Rabba Barabua said to them, Zilu zabinu, komad isluchu v'su iskairu. First go sell in everything that you have, meaning sell all your idols and everything that's related to them, and then come and convert. So what's the implication? The implication is my time. What's the reasoning? It doesn't it show that it means that these idolaters who are in the process of converting to Judaism, that if they sell their idols and turn them into cash, they'll be able to keep and use the cash even when they become Jewish. Right. So doesn't that show that the conversion works into cash? Not necessarily. The Dilma Shiny Hasa, maybe over there it's different. And why would it be different? Well, first of all, they're converting to Judaism. So what does that imply? The kaven the daiti igorai vadai batla. Well, listen, they believe they're in the process of converting to Judaism. You convert to Judaism because you believe in our one God, and so presumably these people who believe in our one God, and as a result, they have nullified this idol. And so as a result, isn't that what's going on? As Rashi says, 3, 6, 9 lines up in Rashi, but lahu mikudam. So the Ovid kochavim mivatal. I'm sorry. Demei. Which Rashi am I supposed to do? Yeah, no, Batlu Magona, V'oda Kochavim, Mevadal Ovodas Kochavim. And an idolater has the ability to eliminate and undo their idolatry. Hilkach Dameha Mutarin Daha Badlu. So as a result, it's going to be permitted. So doesn't that show that Rav Nachman has no proof? So Elamihacha. All right, you're right. That original proof wasn't so good, but here's another proof that suggests that an idolater who sells his idol, the money that he gets in exchange is a Jew's allowed to benefit from it, and of course the idolater is allowed to benefit from it. Elamiyacha Yisrael shahaya noshe ba'ovid kochavim mana. If a Jew's trying to collect $100 from an idolater, umachar avodas kochavim vehevilo, and the idolater sells sells an idol, and brings to the Jew the proceeds, the $100 that he owes him. Or yain nesek vehevilo, or he sells his libation wine, and he brings it to the funds to the Jew. Mutter. That's mutter. So again, if you lend money to a non-Jew, even when you're trying to collect, if he sells an idol and then brings you that money, you can use that money. Everything is fine. And that's the area, that's our proof. That's suggesting that everything works. Aval im amar lo, but if the non-Jew, if the idolater tells you when he's going away and he says, listen, hamtanli, wait 1 second, wait for me. Ad she'emkor avodas kochavim va'avilucha. I'm going to go sell my idol and bring you the funds, meaning he tells you what he's going to do. Well, now that's going to be a problem. Or yein nesech avilucha, or listen, I'm going to sell my libation wine and I'll bring it to you. Asor. Now that money, you can't use that money. So you may be in a stuck position, because he may then say, listen, I gave you $100. It's the only money I have. Exactly. But the bottom line is that's going to be prohibited. So best not for him not to tell you anything. Close your eyes, as they say, and ears. All right. So but again, the idea of the support is the first case, that you're allowed to benefit from it. So Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa. What's the difference between the first case and the second case? Rav Sheshes says Seifa Mishum Dahavale Kirotza B'Kiyumo. In the second case, now all of a sudden the Jew wants the idol to remain in existence. Because if the idol somehow were to have disappeared like that, well, now the person, the debtor, is not going to be able to sell it, and he's not going to get you your $100 to pay you back. So you want that to continue to exist, and that's why we're now going to say that money is prohibited. 1 second though, but 1 second, if you want it to continue to exist, is it really prohibited? We have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Demai that shows you that in fact that even though somebody wants an idol to continue to exist, he's allowed to benefit from it. Because what's the case? Ger va'ovid kochavim, you have a convert and an idolater who are siblings, shiyorshu avihen, and they're inheriting from their father. Now, Ovid Kochavim, who's still an idolater. So again, you have dad, we'll call him John, and we have Bob and Shmuel. So, Shmuel has converted to Judaism. He's a great Jew. And the issue is, now, according to the Torah, according to how we understand it, Shmuel is a new person. And so as a result, technically, he really shouldn't inherit from his parents. But the rabbis instituted that he would be able to inherit because we didn't want to discourage conversion or encourage people to go back to their original lifestyle if, upon the death of their parent. So as a result, what do we say about this situation? The ger, Yachalomar, the ger can say to his brother, Tolata avodas kochavim v'ani maos. You take the idols, I'll take the money. Tolata yein nesech v'ani peros. You take the yayin nesech, the libation wine, and I'll take the fruit. Meaning, even though at that moment when he says that, he wants the idol and the yayin nesech to continue to exist. Because if, after saying that, they go back to the idol and Yain Nesach, and they've somehow disappeared. Well, now the brother who's an idolater is going to end up inheriting part of the money and part of the produce. So until the exchange finishes, the convert wants all these things to continue to exist, and yet we say that it's permitted, as Rashi tells us. The uh, uh, hold on. As Rashi tells us, last of the narrow lines in Rashi, avodas tol ata avodas kochavim. You take the idols. Alma de ger rotza b'kiyuma. That even though the convert wants them to stick around, shalotish daber. He doesn't want them to break. Ad sheyito miyado kenegda. And until he takes his payment that he's going to get based on what the idolater is going to get. So if the idol is worth $5,000, so then until he gets his $5,000 in exchange of cash, he wants this idol to exist. And yet, mutar, we say that this is permitted. And so,
why does it make a difference if the idol disappears? Say someone steals the idol.
Yeah.
So
now all of a sudden,
how does that
the
affect
convert's
him?
going to get less in his inheritance.
He'll get that because he has to split the money with his.
Yeah, of course. The other guy's not going to say, "Oh, well, I was supposed to get the idol, so I guess you get all the money." No. If the money's worth $10,000 and the idol and the Yayin Nesach are worth $10,000, and then all of a sudden the Yayin Nesach and the idol disappear, the idolater's son is not going to say, "Okay, you get the whole thing." Of course not. He's going to say, "All right, well, these things don't exist anymore. They were stolen. Let's split what we do have. We split the cash." We split the cash and the fruit that's worth $10,000, and so I'm going to get 5,000 and you get 5,000, and everybody's going to be happy. But the convert's going to be unhappy because he wishes that the idol and the Yayin Nesach still existed.
But don't both of them, since they're inheriting the father?
Yeah,
quote,
yes.
quote, since
It's
they're
not a
both
problem.
inheriting,
It's not a problem for an idolater to wish.
No, I understand that, but the question is, since both of them are, quote, inheriting the father. Well, okay, we say there's a Jew, he's converted, but that we're saying they're both inheriting the father. Doesn't the Jew now, the convertee, have a chelik in the idol?
No, that's exactly very key, very key. Because because he's a convert and because biblically he does not inherit, the rabbis don't impute that ownership to him. And listen to the next line. The next line of the brisa addresses your point exactly. Im mishabo l'reshus hager asur. If, on the other hand, they did take it and he did take it into his possession, now all of a sudden he took the idol and the Yayin Nesach into his possession. Now it's too late. Too late. Nothing he can do about it. He's taken an ownership interest, and therefore it's impossible. And therefore he's not allowed to benefit from it. He can't say this any longer. But the point of raising this Mishnah is the fact that in this Mishnah, the convert wants the idols to still exist, and yet we allow him to benefit from it. Whereas in the brisa that we cited earlier, where the non-Jew says, "Listen, I'm going to go sell my idol and I'll bring you back the money," we say that that's prohibited because the Jew wants the idol to still exist. So aren't these two Tanaitic statements inconsistent with one another? And the answer is yes, they are inconsistent with one another. And so Rava Bar Ula gives us our first answer to try and explain it.
I have one question here. When it says Mishabal Rashuta Ger Asur, what does that really mean? Because if it comes into his reshut, he's not allowed to use it or benefit. What can he do with it?
No, that's the whole point.
Does he destroy
Let
it?
me clarify it. So those words are saying that once the convert on some level takes possession, so whether he picks it up or brings it into his yard, or they all move it together. So the point is that at that moment it is too late for him to say to his brother, "Listen, you take the idols, I take the cash."
Mm.
Only before he has taken any act of ownership over the idols and the Yayanesek, only before then, when he has no biblical right to them, only then can he say, you take the idols and I take the cash.
So he gets
Once he,
nothing then?
what?
Then he gets nothing if he
No,
touches
no,
that item.
he just has to get rid of the idols.
Right,
Whatever interest he has in the idols, he's not allowed to benefit from. And
right.
so, in the case of $10,000 worth of idols and yayin nesech and $10,000 worth of cash and fruit, he ends up with $5,000. And his other brother's a lucky guy. He's going to end up with the $15,000.
Oh, so he has to split the money then.
Yeah, of course, he's got to split the money
And
because
the idol he has to destroy or leave it on the road or whatever it
or
is.
yeah, I mean, the point is that yes, exactly. The he either needs to try and say, listen, I need you to cut off the half of the idol, or if there are two idols, let's say that there are two idols, make it easy. So two idols and two piles of $5,000. So he's going to have to take one idol and destroy it because that's his interest that he's already taken possession of it, and he gets $5,000. And then the other brother, who's an idolater, well, he can get the $5,000 idol and he can take $5,000 of the cash.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay.
Okay. So now Rava Bar Ula tries to square the circle or whatever, however you want to say it. He answers the question, the apparent inconsistency. Masnizin ba'abos kochavim hamischalekes lefi shvareha. No, our Mishnah is dealing with a situation where the value of the idol is in the metal.
Yeah.
And so as a result, that's why it's okay for the convert to continue to want it, because he can say, you know what, I do want the idol to be just smashed to smithereens and destroyed because all I want is the gold. And so that's the situation. But one second, Tenach avodas kochavim, that works with respect to an idol. Yayin nesech, my ikalamemer. But what do you say about Yayin nesech? How could he say that it's okay to destroy the Yayin nesech? If the Yayin nesech is destroyed, you cut it up. That's not going to destroy it. So he can't want the Yayin nesech to still exist. And yet we say that they're allowed to make that split in that inheritance case. Becheres Hadriani. So you would say that we're talking about Cheres Hadriani. If you remember back to earlier in the Masechet, we saw this Cheres Hadriani before, and it is a pottery that has absorbed a lot of wine. As Rashi tells us, last line of Rashi, beginning of the line, Delo ichpatlan dehayayin balua betocho upolto kishishoru b'mayim, that he doesn't care any longer about the vessel itself, because what do they do with this vessel? It's basically like dried
Earthenware.
no, but in modern terms, it's
No.
basically like cocoa, dried cocoa that you would put in a pot. You put it into the liquid and the water, and then all of a sudden your water tastes like grape juice.
Gotcha.
And so, as a result, he doesn't care if they break it up. The whole point of the item is to be broken up because it's absorbed so much wine, it will impart the taste of wine and it's the wine. The problem is that it's yayin nesek. It'll impart that taste to whatever you have. And so, doesn't that show that he can want the breaking of the yayin nesek? And so here we've shown that he wants the breaking of the idol and the breaking of the yayin nesek. And so as a result, maybe he's allowed to benefit from it because he doesn't need it to stay intact.
What does he do? What can he do with the wine though? It's yayin nesech, isn't it?
No, the point is that you're right. He can't benefit from the yayin nesek, but the point is that he can. He doesn't. What was the problem that we had with the Ger, with the convert saying to his brother, "You take the yayin nesek and I take the cash"? The problem is that he needs to want the yayin nesek to continue to exist. Well, here he doesn't really want the yayin nesech jug to continue to exist. It's fine for it to be broken. So maybe that's a sufficient desire for its destruction that we'll say that it's okay. and therefore he's allowed. And therefore, we can say that when you truly want the item to exist, like when Stan's debtor tells him that he's going to go sell his idol and give him his $100 back, so then that's going to be prohibited. But when we deal with these two brothers, and the brother who's a convert doesn't care whether the thing gets destroyed, either because it's a gold idol or a silver idol, or because it's a Cheres Hadriani, and therefore it can be broken up and it still is going to maintain its value. And so as a result, that's fine. But and so that's how we'll distinguish between the case of the Mishnah and the case of the Brisa.
But if it
But no,
maintains its value, then someone can get benefit from it. He could get benefit from it. He could sell that theoretically, or the same thing with the idol. If he breaks it up into gold, he could get benefit from the gold, even if it's
right, but
destroyed.
because it's broken, our thinking is at the moment in the Gemara is that that's a sufficient amount of destruction that now you would be allowed to benefit from it. But that's where the Gemara is going to precisely what's underlying your concern is exactly where the Gemara is going to go next. V'halo rotze b'kiyumo shelo yiganvu v'lo shelo yovdu. He still wants that this idol not be stolen or lost. And so as a result, he does on some level want the continued existence of the item. And so that's still a problem. And so as a result, we reject Rava Bar Ula's answer. It is not based on a distinction of, oh, in the case of the inheritors, it's a case where they don't want the convert doesn't need to want the item to continue to exist. It's not that as the distinction. So we still have the problem. Why, in the case of the Brisa, do we say that that the creditor is not allowed to benefit when the debtor says, I'm going to go sell my idol? And in the case of the two brothers, he's allowed to say, listen, you take the idol and I take the cash. Ella Amar of Papa, so Rav Papa offers the next answer. Yerusha's Hager Ka'amra. No, the point is, you're trying to bring a question about the debtor case from a case of an inheritance of a convert. Shiny Yerusha's Hager Akilu Barabanan. The rabbis are lenient in the Ger case. Because maybe he'll go back to his bad ways, and we don't want that. So as a result, it is not really, there is no difference between the two cases.
Wow.
And so really, we should say in the convert case that you're not allowed to do that. But because we want to discourage the convert from going back and becoming an idolater again so that he gets his inheritance, we will allow him to make that exchange. And thereby, even though in that exchange he wants the idol to continue to exist, that's going to be fine. And Tanya Namihacha, we actually have a brisa that seems to support this. B'med Dvarim Amurim, because it says in connection with the Mishnah that said that you're allowed to convert that they're allowed to make this exchange. When is it that you're allowed to make this exchange? Sheyarshu. Only when you inherit. Aval nishtatfu asur. If they were partners, you would not be allowed to do it. Even though you could say that they didn't have the partnership didn't have any specific interest directly. The Jewish partner didn't have any specific interest in the idol itself. We're not going to allow that exchange to happen, because during the moment of that exchange, the Jew is going to want the idol to continue to exist, and therefore, once the Jew wants the idol to continue to exist, the benefit that's associated with it is prohibited.
So that would be a partnership such as a business that they decide to dissolve the business and they're breaking.
That's exactly right. That's correct. Correct. Okay. Well, we've dealt with two Rav Nachman Ula and Avimi Bar Papa questions. We come to our third and final one. Hadar Yasvu v'Kamibaylahu Ger Toshav Maushi Yavatal Avodas Kochavim. We know, because we've seen throughout this Masechah, that an idolater has the ability to nullify an idol. What if that idolater is a really religious person and is a ger toshav, somebody who is, and we'll define what a ger toshav is, but for the moment it is somebody who's observing some of the mitzvot. Exactly what mitzvot we're going to see in a moment, but the point is that they don't worship idols. So this person, what's their status? Are they able to eliminate an idol? Do we say defalach mevatel, delo palach lo mevatel? Do we say that, listen, only a worshiper of idols has the ability to nullify an idol, and a non-worshiper cannot? So this guy would not be able to. O Dilma, kol de barmine mevatel v'hai barminehu. Or do we say no? It's whoever is essentially from the same seed, from the same nations. The point being that they're not Jewish. As long as he's not Jewish, then he's going to be able to nullify. Because remember, we know that a Jew does not have the ability to nullify the idol of an idolater. So now we're going to say, so again, Rav Nachman comes to the rescue. Amar lahu Rav Nachman, mistabra defalach mevatel delo palach lo mevatel. I think that only one who worships an idol is able to undo the idol, and not somebody who does not, and therefore a ger toshav would not. Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. Yisrael shematza avodas kochavim b'shuk. If a Jew finds an idol on the street, an shelo basel yado, before he picks it up, before it comes into his ownership, Ama Omer la'ovid kochavim umevatla. He should ask an ovid kochavim to nullify it. Mishibata leviado, but once it comes to his hand, Eino Omer la'ovid kochavim umevatla. He can no longer ask an idolater to nullify it. Minesha Amru, because we say, and now this is going back on some level on the first comment, Ovid kochavim mevatel ovados kochavim shelo v'shel chaveiro. An idolater has the ability to nullify not only his own idols, but somebody else's idols. And we're going to understand that to mean somebody else's idols that are not the same, meaning it's not a copy of your idol. It's they worship Markulis, you worship Peor, and so as a result, the person who worships Peor can nullify the Markulis idol, and the person who worships the Markulis idol can nullify the Peor idol. So Bain Ovda, Uvein Shelo Ovda, and whether the person worships it or not. So my Ovda, Masha Ein Ovda, what does it mean, the Brisa, that whether he worships or not? If you say that both of them are idolaters, well, that was the prior case of the person can nullify his own idol, and he can nullify the idol of his friend. So Elalav, don't we need to say that when it says whether he worships it or whether he does not worship it, what it means is Ovda Oved Kochavim. I'm sorry. Elalav Ovda Oved Kochavim. Rather, it means that is he an Oved Kochavim? And what does it mean that he doesn't worship it? Ger Toshav. It means that he is a Ger Toshav. So doesn't that show that a Ger Toshav does have the ability to nullify it? Because after all, that Brisa says that you could ask that person to nullify the idol for you. Ushmamina Ger Toshav Nami V'Vadol. Doesn't this show that a Ger Toshav has the ability to nullify an idol? No, you're overreading it. La'olam emalach idi v'idi over kochavim. Really, only an idolater is being referenced in this brisa. The amrat hainu shelo v'shel chaveiro. And when we talked about an idolater that belonged to this one or to that one, reisha zev v'zel or v'zev v'zel markulis. The point is that it's where both people, where the person worships both Peor and Markulis. And so the point is whether or not it was your idol of the same stripe or somebody else's idol of the same stripe, you're allowed to nullify it. and Seifa Zel for Vizel Markulis. And in the end, the point is it's not about possession, it's about I can nullify your idol even if I don't worship it. So Meisvei, 1 second. I'll ask you a question. Ezehu ger toshav. So now we're going to cite a brisa that tells us who a ger toshav is. So the bottom line is we first try again. Rav Nachman says that only those who worship idols can nullify them. We brought a challenge and we were able to respond to that challenge. And so now we bring challenge number 2 to Rav Nachman's point. So what does this brisa say? Ezehu ger toshav. Who's a ger toshav? Kol shekibel alav bifnei shlosha chaverim shelo la'avod avodas kochavim divrei Rabbi Meir. That Rabbi Meir says that it's anybody who accepts in front of 3 people, namely a court, that they're not going to worship idols. So that's the definition of a ger toshav. The chachamim say no. Kol shekibel alav sheva mitzvos shekiblu aleya b'nei Noach. If you accept the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, well, then you're a ger toshav. Acherim omrim, and the third position says, Elu lo bo l'chlal ger toshav. Neither of those. It's not enough to accept Hashem and not to worship idols in front of a court. It's not enough to unilaterally decide that you're going to observe all 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, which includes not worshiping idols. Ella ezehu ger toshav. Who's the ger toshav? Ze ger ochel nevelos. It's a ger that does every mitzvah except they eat non-kosher meat. Shekibel alav l'kayim kol mitzvahs ha'amuras b'Torah chutz me'isur nevelos. That they accept every mitzvah in the Torah except for eating nevelos. Miyachadin etzlo yayin. And so now that we've said, and that isn't where we've gotten the question to Rav Nachman. That's just background in this particular brisa. But now the brisa continues. What are you allowed to do with this ger toshav? Miyachadin etzlo yayin. You're allowed to leave wine with him. Ve'ein mafkidon etzlo yayin. But you can't deposit wine with him. So what's the distinction between those two? So Rashi helps us out. So let's take a look. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Samach Dalan Bet. Aval miyachadin etzlo yayin. Yisrael, a Jew, meniach b'chanuto, can leave in his store ad sheyelech kedei mil, an amount of time for him to walk 2,000 amos. 1,000 amos. Oh yoter, but not any longer. Which you're not allowed to do with an idolater. If you leave the wine with an idolater at all, you're going to have a problem. Dahai kavan de lo pala, that this guy, because he does not worship idols, lo naga, he's not going to touch it, velo menasach, and he's not going to do libations with the wine that you've left to him. Ulamaga oved kochavim, and when it comes to allowing somebody else to touch it, Da'asi ma'alma, who comes from, who's an idolater who comes from the rest of the world, bebeto, in his house, lo chayshina. We don't worry about that. De'keven de'ein lo hana, because the person who's there is not going to get any benefit. Bekach, from allowing this idolater who visited his home to touch the wine of the Jew who left it there. So Eino Menicho Liyaga, he's not going to allow that idolater to go and touch it. Ulach Lufe, or to switch it out. Bisman Muat, in the small amount of time, Leika Lamichash, we're not going to worry about it. So the
Can
point
you just say that again? I mean, it just got a little confusing there. What's the
point?
difference
So
here?
I'm going to say it outside.
Right.
The point is that when it comes to a ger toshav, you can leave your wine with him for a short period of time, and we don't worry about him touching it, because his touching it on some level doesn't officially make it yayin nesech, because he's not an idolater, and he's not going to use it for a libation. There's no reason for him to allow anyone else to touch it either, who might be visiting his house. And we don't worry about some other visitor or switching of it, because you're not gone for so long. But if you were to deposit with him the wine for a longer period of time, it would still be prohibited, because then we do need to worry about him allowing somebody else to touch it, or somebody to switch it out.
It's a time issue then.
What?
It's a time issue.
It's a time issue, correct. But that again, that issue doesn't exist with an idolater. With a true idolater, you can't leave him with the wine even for 2 seconds. And even if the city is a majority of Jews, you still can't make that long-term deposit. But when it comes to the short-term deposit, you can leave it with him for a short term, etzlo yayin, even if the city is a majority of idolaters. So the bottom line is all that matters is the person you're leaving with it and the amount of time. So that's the next point in that brisa. Next is shamno kiyeno. His oil is like his wine. Just as his wine is permitted, his oil is permitted. Now, the question the Gemara asks is, well, why would you ever think that the oil would be prohibited? It should be the other way around. And so we're going to change the language right now. Shamno kiyeno salgadaita. What do you mean that his oil is like his wine? Shemen mika havi yein nesek. Is oil ever used as a libation that we would ever think that it would be prohibited? No. Elayeno kishamno. No, his wine is like his oil, meaning just as you're allowed to consume his oil, you're also allowed, just as you're allowed to benefit from his oil, you're allowed to benefit from his wine. There's no prohibition. You're not supposed to drink his wine or drink his oil or eat his oil, but consume his oil. But the bottom line is you're allowed to benefit from it. Olashar kol davar. And now here is the language that we're really bringing this for. And when it comes to everything else, harehu ka'ovid kochavim. He's like an idolater. Oh, when it comes to everything else, he's like an idolater. All right, well, we'll come back to that in just a second because we have one more line in the brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, yeno yein nesek. Rabbi Shimon says, you know what? No, I'm sorry, but even though he's a ger toshev, he may be a wonderful person, but his wine is still that is still considered yayin nesek. And therefore you cannot even benefit from it. And some people say, no. What Rabbi Shimon said was mutter b'shtiya. Not only can you benefit from it, but you can even drink it. So it's two opposites. But in any event, the whole reason that we brought this brisa is because of the line that it says, when it comes to all other matters, he's like an idolater. So Gatani Mia Ulashar Kol Dvarav Harei Huka Ovid Kochavim. Lamai Hilchasa. What is that talking about? Lav de Mevata Leovodas Kochavim Kaovid Kochavim. Doesn't it mean to tell us, well, he's like an idolater for everything else? Well, one of the things that idolaters can do is nullify an idol. So isn't that what it's talking about? So no, not necessarily. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, lo, no, it doesn't have to be that. Litin rishus ulevatel rishus. It's talking about giving permission and nullifying his ownership rights. So what is that talking about? V'kedetanya. It's like this brisa. Yisrael mumer mishamer shabbato b'shuk. If a Jew who does not, who is a mumar, who is denies certain rules, but he observes Shabbos in public, mevatel rishus. He has the ability to relinquish his rights. Now let's back up and talk about what this is referring to. This is referring to, you have a courtyard, and in that courtyard you have 5 different Jews that live in houses that are off that courtyard. They are not allowed to carry from that courtyard into their houses, even though there is something surrounding all of it. So you might think, well, it's all one big possession, but it's not, because the courtyard is jointly owned by the 5 of them, and their houses are individually owned. And so they cannot walk on Shabbos and carry something from their houses into the courtyard, and therefore they can't go into somebody else's house. But what they are allowed to do is create what is called an eruv, a mixture. And they are allowed to say that all of them together own all of the property. And therefore, they all contribute to the creation of an eruv, and some bread is set aside, and thereby they all are allowed to carry. The
It's an Erev
problem is
Chatzerot. Erev
an Erev
Chatzerot.
Chatzeros, exactly. That's what we call an Erev generally. And so they're allowed to carry across. What happens if one of them doesn't participate? If one of them doesn't participate, they can't do any. They can't carry it all. If it's already Shabbos, it's too late to participate in the Eruv because they can't make a kinyan, and so as a result, he can't take possession of part of the bread that is going to serve as the form of the Eruv. And so as a result, there's what are they supposed to do? They want to be able to carry, even though John doesn't want to, John didn't participate, or Yonatan didn't participate. With everybody else in the chutzner wants to be able to walk between their houses. So what Yonatan can do is say, "Listen, I'm giving up my rights in my home and in the courtyard." And so as a result, now, and he can do that even on Shabbos. And so now everybody can go in everywhere. Yeah. Because he's given up his rights. And so as a result, there isn't a separate rishus that goes across. And so, but only a Jew can do that. If the person isn't Jewish, you still need to, if the person isn't Jewish, how do we deal with that? And how do we have this big Eruv in all of Riverdale? The answer is that we rent from every non-Jew. And so we talk to the government, and the government allows us to rent effectively all of the property in all of Riverdale. And so as a result, we now have made everything into one big joint possession of all the Jews in Riverdale. And so as a result, that's what allows us to do it. And so only by renting, it is not enough for the non-Jew to say, I'm going to give up my rights. And that's what it's saying here. And so when it says, litain rishus, lovatel rishus, it's saying we're not going to, as Rashi says, litain rishus, she'eno yachol. This is Rashi from the bottom of the narrow lines, bottom of Rashi on Samach Daled and Aleph. Samach Daled and Bet, excuse me. It's 6, 9, 12, 15, 17 or 18 lines up. Litain rishus, she'eno yachol litain rishuso liYisrael. This Ger Toshav does not have the ability to give his property to the Jewish people. Elohim came Sachar Mimenu, unless they rent it from him, Me'erev Shabbos, on Friday. And so as a result, it didn't happen. Therefore, there's nothing that can be done. And that's exactly what this Bryce is about to tell us. So let's read the Bryce again. 1, 2, 3, 3 lines up from the narrow lines of in the Gemara. First word on the line, Ogedetanya. Yisrael Mumer Mishamer Shabto B'Shuk. If you have somebody who's Jewish and observes Shabbos, but he doesn't believe in God, so Mevatel Rishus, he is able to he's able to participate in the Eruv just like a full-fledged Jew. She'ein Mishaber Shabbato B'Shuk, but if he doesn't observe Shabbos in the public, ein Mevatel Rishus. Well, then he's considered almost like he's not Jewish, and he's not because he doesn't observe Shabbos publicly, and therefore that he's not able to participate. Because the rabbi said, Yisrael notim rishos mevatel rishos. A Jew has the ability to nullify their rights and give their rights up to those other people in the courtyard. Uva ovid kochavim ad sheyiskor. But when it comes to an idolater, it needs to be rented. And ketzad, and how does the Jew give up his rights? Omer lo, he says to the other neighbors, Rishusi kinuya lecha, my rights in the courtyard is transferred to you. Rishusi mivutelas lecha, or my right is nullified to you. And so kana, and thereby the neighbor has acquired the right. Ve'ein sarach lezakos, and there doesn't need to be any kind of formal transaction. There doesn't need to be any formal kinyan. As Rashi says, ve'ein sarach lezakos al yedei kinyan. Last line of Rashi. And so,
but there are buildings.
What?
In which there are apartment buildings in which an Eruv is established, and they don't. I don't. Do they knock on everybody's door to get reshut to sell it to them? I mean, they do establish Eruv Chatzerot in apartment buildings, right?
Yeah. So usually you're supposed to talk to the management company, and facilitate that. That's my understanding as to how that has to happen. There is a question of whether maybe I don't know whether there are bases to say that you don't need to get everybody to participate or you don't need to rent. But it's an interesting
It
question.
is interesting.
Well, there's a discussion in Eruvin. I remember that, and then when we learned this, and I saw a article. There is where if someone's in a hotel,
Yeah.
sometimes you go to the manager of the hotel. I said, "I'm giving you $1 to the manager of the hotel so that I could carry." So you're taking some ownership in the hotel. It's a whole discussion with how
Yeah, so usually you
Ramosha
shouldn't have to
decides
do
on that,
that
and what the,
because
and there was a discussion Ramosha Feinstein. Yes, no.
yeah, I don't think you need to do that in a hotel because usually the hotel has the rights to enter any room as they want. So it's not like you become the owner of the hotel room. If you in fact became the owner of the hotel room, then you're right. Then you might need to do that. But in general, my understanding is that the hotel is all owned by one person. So as a result, you don't necessarily need to create that air of Chatzeros the same way.
But
But
if it's
you,
not,
but
but if it's not owned by a Jew, let's say it's a non, and so there is an opinion that one
Yeah,
essentially
yeah, yeah. I'm
buys
sure
that
that there's
space.
an opinion that says that you need to do that, but I don't think we poskin that way. But maybe it's maybe different people poskin different ways. But in any event, the Gemara is going to turn to some more stories involving a ger toshav. But for those stories, stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful day.
How did you, just one point, how did you learn this? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
The when we learned that the person had to go a mil o yoter. How did we learn that when Rashi
Yeah,
above?
so I'm not 100% sure because it does seem a little bit odd. I would have thought that it's got to be less. But the point
Right.
it may be that the question of how long it is saying that when it says akade mil o yoter, meaning that more or less, a meal more or less is
I would
what
have
you.
said then I would have said pochota yoter.
I know, I know. I'm not 100% sure as to how to read that it says that but the idea is that if it's longer than a certain amount of time, then you're going to have a problem. That's
Right.
clearly the implication. I'm not
Right.
exactly sure why it says Kedei Mil or Yoter. It could be that's the language that the Gemara sometimes will use. But you're right. I'm not 100% sure as to why it says O Yoter instead of Pachot. All right. Have a great day. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.